Hi Liz, thank you for joining us today on the Diary of an EHO podcast. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Could you start by telling our audience a little bit about yourself and about your career within environmental health?
Sure. So I have been an environmental health practitioner for, I'll say, over 30 years.
Wow.
It dates me if I give the correct number. Interestingly, I started off in Australia and trained to work in government because that's what EHOs did in those days. And I was in the Queensland government for 3 years, 5 years, I should say. So we have three layers of government in Australia. We have local, state and federal. So I was employed by the Queensland state government, and it was a very different role to what we have today, and certainly to what was happening in England. So that's where my roots began in my journey through environmental health.
And how did you find the transition from Australia to the UK?
It was interesting. One of my life goals was to come and live in England. I was fascinated by life in England, and I thought it was all hollyhocks and chocolate box cottages. And of course, the reality is it isn't. So a friend and I from school, we had planned this trip to England, and we came over and went to Cambridge. So we didn't actually start in London. And one of the things that motivated me to really have the trip was I was becoming very frustrated with prosecuting local businesses in Australia. I think I ran up about 300 prosecutions in 5 years. And I went to the chief of food in those days and said, look, what do these businesses have to tell them about how they comply with the law? I said, because I feel awful prosecuting them. And they weren't really serious issues. They were easy prosecutions because they hadn't made sausages to the right composition of meat, or they had milk bread with no milk.
So it could have been an advisory.
The law was there, but
Yeah.
these guys are butchers, they're bakers. They didn't have access to the law. So the chap said to me, well, Liz, if they want to find out the law, they can get a copy of it and read it. And I thought, well, do you know what? You couldn't go in and bake a loaf of bread. That's a bit unfair. So when I came over here, I wanted to continue working in environmental health, and I found it quite difficult to actually get a role here because they didn't recognise my Australian qualifications. And that was quite frustrating. So that really led me into the private sector. But before I went private, I did have the opportunity of doing about a year of local authority work, housing inspections, which were definitely an eye-opener. I did house condition surveys in Wales. There was a lot of money then, a lot of grants to be able to do up properties. And of course, the food hygiene inspections for some London boroughs. So I got a good flavour of how it works in the UK, and I was lucky enough to be able to find an avenue to do that. But from there, I went into the commercial sector.
So from local authority in Australia to local authority in the UK, what were the main differences? Once you got into the local authority setting, what would you say the main differences?
So when I worked in Australia, number one, EHOs didn't do health and safety. It's looked after separately. I've never been involved in it in Australia, so of course I didn't have that knowledge or experience. Similarly, the other difference was the abattoir work. So in England, they do meat inspection as their training. In Australia, as you can imagine, the whole meat industry is so big and so vast. They have specialists who only do meat inspection.
And they're not environmental health.
They're not environmental health. They are specialists, and that is a trade, that is a qualification in itself. So those were the two things I didn't have. But apart from that, my work was very much environmental based. There was a lot of refuse, there was a lot of water treatment, sewage treatment plants, all the juicy stuff, the good old core work. When I came over here, it seemed to be predominantly food safety inspections and health and safety and housing.
And this was the early 90s, right?
This was in the early 90s. So it was different work, but ultimately complaints are complaints.
And your skills were very transferable.
I believe they were, because I think a lot of environmental health isn't necessarily about the qualification, it's about the communication skills.
Absolutely.
And I'm a great believer that you don't really gain those until you're a bit older anyway. So I'm the first to say my early years as an EHO in Australia, and probably some of my early years here, weren't my best work. because I still had to refine that ability to communicate at all levels, and I think also be able to deal with people who are in a position sometimes where they're not comfortable, they're not happy, they're defensive, and learning how to get a message across when people are in that mindset, I think is one of the skills that we get from environmental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So going back to your career spanning across continents, is there a key moment that would you say that helped shape your career?
I think the key moment was when I was told that businesses could find out for themselves. But then when I came over here, I think I'd already realised I wasn't a good fit for government. I enjoyed it, but I wanted to work with businesses and help businesses. So I think the path I found was when I started working for a retailer, a big supermarket company which no longer exists. They took me on board and they took the gamble on me, and I went in as a company standards officer. So I looked after everything. I looked at complaints, noise complaints, obviously the food safety, the health and safety, noxious odours, pests, lots of pests. It was great, and I saw a lot of different aspects of environmental health, but through commercial eyes. And I think the interesting point there was I was in court again, but this time I was appearing defending the company as opposed to the prosecutor. So in Australia, I'd been very used to going in there and prosecuting businesses, and I to this day think it's much easier to prosecute than to defend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I did make several court appearances on behalf of the company, and I learned a lot about how the law works. So I'd seen it from both angles. I'd seen it from, going in there and preparing summons, seeing it through to court, and then on this side, being able to prepare a due diligence, getting all the information together, and making sure that the company was represented in the best light. So I think that was quite a defining time for me, because I now had a very even, balanced set of scales, and I could see both aspects.
Both sides of the fence,
yeah.
And also, you got the same experience, local authority experience, as well as private sector experience within the UK as well.
Indeed. And I had no private sector in Australia, because that was another interesting point. When I'd go back to Australia and see my colleagues, they'd say, we don't understand why people use you, why you have commercial EHOs in the UK, because, you have government EHOs. Why do they need someone commercially? And it's funny, because that conversation was probably 25 years ago. Now, as you're probably aware, it's big business in Australia.
Absolutely.
The consultancies are out there. Businesses have environmental health support. They use commercial EHOs, again, because it enables them to be prepared and to be the best they can be from an expert.
Absolutely. And they are the experts usually in-house, or work with them on the consultative basis?
It varies. So in Australia, when I was there, they had food technologists in-house who, of course, as we know, are not EHOs.
No.
Now they do have the big consultancies setting up there. So similar consultancies that you see in the UK, you see in Australia and New Zealand, and they work with businesses. So the same arrangements, businesses pay to have advice, but a lot of them do have their own, in-house advice.
Well, our clients are split across both the local authorities and private sector, and the type of roles that they offer, or they're very transferable in terms of skill set. It's, as you said, different side of the fence, more advisory on the more advisory on the private sector side, and more enforcement, or also advisory on the local authority side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think local authority EHOs have got a massive opportunity to work with businesses to provide support and advice. And I think, it's a misconception that they're there just to prosecute or to badger or bully. They're not. Most people go into environmental health because they want to keep people safe. And indeed, that's what keeps me going.
Was that your passion to get into environmental health, to keep people safe?
No, my passion was to become a vet.
Mine too.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's actually living the dream. She's becoming the vet, but I wasn't diligent enough at school.
Yeah, I've got 4 children. I'm trying to push them I don't think. I mean, they love working with animals and volunteering, but I don't think any of them has actually said like this is a career I want to pursue. But I'm working on it.
Yeah, I mean, environmental health was a fallback for me. It wasn't my lifelong passion. Indeed, it was suggested by the guidance officer at school. So that's the person that would go through what your career,
Like a careers advisor,
opportunities are.
yeah.
Exactly. And you know, in actual fact, when I look at the course I went through, it was so interesting. We covered such diverse
But
topics.
there would be an element of veterinary science, I suppose, to environmental
Well,
health.
there's microbiology, there's anatomy and physiology, albeit not specifically about animals, but there is a lot on pests and rats.
And what about even in port health? In Australia, does port health, would they look at livestock?
So I think Port Health in Australia is probably federal. So
Okay.
that's the other tier of government, because I was
Okay.
in the middle. And a lot of what we did was more trading standards type work.
Okay.
So the local government would look at the complaints, the neighbourhood complaints, and
So counterfeit goods, underage sales, that type of thing.
I mean, so diverse. We had a lot of tasks that we did to do with dangerous drugs.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of looking at suspicious doctors who were perhaps prescribing when they shouldn't have been. So it was
Wow.
hugely diverse. And then, of course, if you go into the rural areas, you know, I remember when I did country service, I was based in a place called Toowoomba, 2 hours west of Brisbane, for anyone that knows it. But our journey took us right out to the Northern Territory border, South Australian border, massive amount of territory to cover, and acting as a support element for the
With
local government.
For the indigenous population.
In some parts, more up north, there was a lot of work with Indigenous, a lot of support, and there still is. And the programs they've got in place now have come on leaps and bounds since the days I was doing it. And if I was better read, I could advise them. But a lot of them are around plumbing and getting water into the households. There's another one about clean drinking water and making sure that people are not, their health isn't affected by the environments that they're living in. So environmental health is as diverse as you want it to be, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone who is looking to either embark on a career in environmental health, or someone who's thinking of a career change into environmental health? Actually, there's two questions there.
So for people that are starting out on the journey, I think the beauty of environmental health is that you get a very good, strong science qualification to start with. There are professional memberships available through Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, and you've got the opportunities of working within local authority, and depending on where you are in the country, those local authorities are extremely diverse. So you can have the city boroughs, but you can also have the rural environments. But what I'd say is, if you're someone who likes change, you don't want every day to be the same.
No.
You like getting out of the office, as we used to say in our day. If you leave the office, always carry a file under your arm so it looks like you're working. Well, we don't have files now, do we?
Tablets.
Yeah, carry your tablet. So it's definitely, it gives you a lot of that. If you're someone that needs stimulation, that wants to get involved, that wants to help people and guide people, but also has a healthy respect for the law and understands that, you know, the environmental health are there to keep people safe. They're there to make sure food's safe, to make sure that workplaces are safe. So the opportunities are as vast as you want them to be. And I think for someone starting out, that's great. The second question, for people who are already in a career that want to diversify, I meet a lot of chefs who have retrained as environmental health officers. And obviously, yeah, this runs on from the food and health and safety angle.
Absolutely.
But they bring a lot to the table because they understand how food businesses work.
Yeah.
They understand how the workplace works. Now, if you're a young person coming straight from school, you might have had a gap year, you might not have. You don't really know about workplaces. You may not understand about how businesses work. So people who are looking at a second career automatically bring that wisdom, that experience, and they can apply it, I think, quite successfully. So maybe you're able to hit the ground running. So I think for a second career, for those reasons, I think it's a really good choice.
Yeah, I mean, interesting you say that, because the biggest demographic, I've been working or recruiting within the environmental health sector for about 27 years now, and the biggest demographic for those doing masters, conversion masters, tend to be chefs,
Yeah.
because they understand how food businesses work, and they've probably had interactions with environmental health officers and seen, again, similar to what you said before, the other side of the fence.
Yeah, and I find the chefs the chefs embrace it, and I know quite a few who have gone from that side of it. They're now successful EHOs, and some of them have stayed in local government. Others have gone back into the food sector.
Have they?
Yeah, so again, the doors are open.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are lots of doors. You just have to knock on them.
Sadly, there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding amongst the general public what environmental health is, and misconceptions. What do you think some of these misconceptions are?
The first one that always springs to my mind is, I mean, I do a lot of different tasks, but I still keep my hand in with auditing. I have private clients, I support them. You wear the white coat.
Yeah.
Automatically, people will point and say, health inspector, there must be rats, there must be a problem. No, it's not that at all. And I think if you see an environmental health officer going around a food business, it doesn't mean there's a problem.
No.
Because this is what they do. They regularly visit them. They make sure that they're
Isn't
doing
a problem.
what they need to do. Yeah, exactly. They're there to prevent the problems and to keep everyone focused. And a lot of food businesses really enjoy when the EHO comes to visit, because they like to talk about it.
They do, but they
Yeah.
don't like it during peak hours, because
No.
the customers won't see the white coat in the same way.
I know, and this is the trouble. So I think, we certainly have TV shows like A Life of Grime that gave a lot of insight into how diverse the role is. And I think maybe the public think that EHO is a sign of a problem when it's not. It's, it's two things. It's a sign of just routine work, but it's also the sign of businesses who have someone in there supporting them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And forward thinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Excellent. So in terms of the next generation, now in my own experience of working within environmental health recruitment for 27 years, I've noticed the number of students dwindling every year, which is very sad. And what do you think that environmental health professionals can do as a profession, or environmental health as a profession can do to attract young talent into the profession?
I know there's been some changes at the CIH lately, and I know that their initiatives at the moment are to try and bring that recruitment back into the profession and to look at how we can appeal to young people. Personally, I think the best way is to get into the schools, go in there, have a chat, tell people about what you do, dispel the myths,
Yes.
and let people know how absolutely interesting it is.
Yes.
Because, you can be working in a local authority, you can be specialising in the food or the health and safety or the housing. You can also be working on cruise ships. You can be inspecting hotels, or you can be
It's so diverse, yeah.
advising port health. It is so diverse, and I think after a couple of years in local authority, then you get an idea about what you like, what you're interested in, what your
And
passions
can
are.
specialise.
Yeah, and there are so many more opportunities now than there were back in the day.
I mean, yeah, of course there are. But the thing is, these programs which you mentioned earlier, although very popular, actually, because it increases ratings, show the negative aspects of environmental health. It gets the viewings up, but that's not what environmental health is about. So we work with loads of schools, colleges, and so we target young people at careers fairs before they have decided what they want to do as a career. And the general sort of consensus is, you're dealing with filthy verminous premises or overcrowding or cockroaches. They don't understand the options that are available to them. And I personally think that when we do these careers fairs, you have other establishments, supermarkets, Royal Air Force, police, but there's not a representation from environmental health as a profession. And I think it will be, to interact, because a lot of interaction now is online, but when there is careers fairs, young people relish that opportunity to meet with people that are in that profession and speak to them face to face and learn more about it.
I think maybe that's where the role for CIH could come through, if they were to look at how they make it happen. They may well be already, But if they had people that were involved in that could go and explain, the depth of what the job does cover. Because, the life of crime is very much about nasty things and
viewership.
And but actually, there are so many different roles. And I think it is getting the young people to see that, because we only know what we see in the media, really. But if we have someone who comes along and explains, what you can be doing, and also lining it up with what your particular interests are. Certainly you mentioned working in retail. Well, as a retail EHO, it was amazing, because you were dealing with so many different aspects, and whether they be complaints or whether they be carrying out training courses for the staff.
Absolutely.
It is very much a profession that is not a one-way street. But
it's not.
It's about getting that message through to people. And as you say, the young people need to hear it, I think.
Absolutely. And also, as a profession, thankfully things have changed during my time working in talent acquisition in the profession, but it's still underrepresented. It doesn't represent the communities that environmental health serves. If you look at the demographics, certainly at decision maker level, it doesn't reflect the demographics of the communities that they serve. What do you think we can do to change that?
Again, I think it's about how you get those messages across. And I think if you're looking at demographics, what you probably need to do is look at where the communities gather and start publicising that. If it's at local events, local fairs, who says you can't have someone out there, telling people about these career opportunities and opening their eyes? Because for a lot of people, they may never have encountered an environmental health officer. They've really got no idea about it. But in terms of job security, there are so many jobs out there.
So many.
You don't see many unemployed environmental health officers.
You don't.
So, it's and again, it's something that can be very rewarding if you want to work within your community once you've done your training.
Absolutely. We've actually covered the underrepresentative. We'll pause this bit out. So going back to someone who's about to embark on a career in environmental health, prior to gaining their qualifications, what would you say are the most important attributes or skills?
I think you have to be someone who's a good communicator. I think it's very hard to teach communication skills to someone who doesn't have any. And I do think communication breakdown is one of the, I think, issues that relates to bad relationships between businesses and EHOs. I think in terms of the actual person, you need someone who's got quite an open mind, someone who wants to learn, and someone who's has passion. I think that when you're starting off in your career, in my mind, that's the most passionate you're going to be, because everything's new and shiny and exciting. So I think it's a case of perhaps not making any predetermined decisions about what job you're going to do. But if you get into the course, then exploring the opportunities it's going to offer, and spending time doing work experience is great as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in terms of, so looking forward, what do you think as a profession are the challenges environmental health faces?
Obviously shortage of EHOs is a significant one, and I believe steps are underway to address that, but I think that the profession is changing. What we are now seeing is obviously the very strong rumours that private organisations will support or take over the role of the local authority EHO. Assured schemes, whether or not that happens, who knows?
I've seen a shift towards that.
Yeah, and I think, the consultancies now, there are very big consultancies. They have a lot of people working for them. They work in a slightly different way. Perhaps they understand the commercial challenges more than people working in local authority. Perhaps there is a way that local authority can blend with the private consultancies, the private resources, to be able to make sure that businesses are operating safely, and ultimately people are safe when they go out to eat, when they go to events. You only have to look at some of the horrific accidents that take place through poor health and safety.
Festivals.
Festivals, and things.
Even sporting events, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so again, this is the role of the EHO to try and be there and to try and educate businesses into safe practices.
Yeah. So how do you see environmental health evolving in terms of technology and AI?
Oh, that's on everyone's lips at the moment, the AI side of things. I don't really have an opinion on it because I haven't explored the AI opportunities in any great depth.
Sure.
I think AI is going to impact us all.
Mm-hmm.
I think in 10 years' time, we wouldn't even ask that question because AI will already be in place. I still think there is the role for the person-to-person communication.
Yes.
And I think that what is important is to be able to encourage businesses to see the benefits of working safely. And to me, you need a person to be able to do that. Yeah. So there's probably a role for AI, but not anything I've encountered at the moment.
Going back to your career, spanning different continents and decades, couple of decades, what would you say would be like in terms of what? Obviously, you've been working in local authority, private sector, and in different countries. What would be like a pivotal moment that really sort of stands out to you?
There have been so many. I think in 2 days I was in 4 countries.
Wow.
There was a lot of travel, but I chose that.
In 2 days?
In 2 days.
What
okay,
countries?
they're European countries.
Okay, but so you're crossing borders?
Yeah, so I was crossing borders, and there's a lot of getting on and off planes. For me, I like a job that involves travel. So I'm not someone that would be in the same place every day. That doesn't work for me. But I think one of the other interesting cases, and I still remember it now because since I have progressed with my career, I've now got a master's in law, and
Amazing.
I'm a law lecturer as well. So that's interesting. But I still remember many years ago with my supermarket company, they had 32 out-of-date yogurts, and they were 4 days out of date. So by calculations, that meant they'd missed 16 checks or something like that. So we toddled off to court, and we had all our due diligence. We had our training records and our temperature records, and we had everything. And I still remember I was there representing the company, the EHO was there, and yeah, there were out-of-date yogurts. It was a fact. But
on the shelves?
On the shelf, offered for sale. And no one wants out-of-date food.
No.
And I remember that the EHO had put forward his case, and the magistrate just turned around and said, look, you've chosen to prosecute the company. I don't see what more the company could have done than walk behind the manager and hit him over the head with a stick every time he didn't do his job properly. Case dismissed.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I quite like this because I'd managed to get all the information together. I'd proven that the company had due diligence in place, and okay, it was down to an individual not doing their job. Possibly human not doing human's job very well. But it did stick in my mind because then I saw some case law quite a few years later where they had exactly the same quote from a magistrate about getting the stick out, and I thought, well, that must be real then, because I actually had that experience. But there have been so many interesting cases, and interesting things I've been involved in. I've inspected prisons, I've sampled lettuce for cholera, riding establishments. I've been to homes where people can't cope anymore. Certainly a heartbreaking one where an old chap was living on his own, couldn't get up the stairs anymore. Someone smelt gas. Who do you call? You call the environmental health officer. So we came on in, and the poor chap. So we managed to get his house cleaned up for him. Wow. We got his bathroom working. So there are so many moments. Yeah. There are rewarding moments, and there's so many different aspects to it. You've got to, if you have a bad day, next day's always going to be a better day.
Absolutely. So, with your different experiences in different countries, has that made your role obviously it's made it more interesting, but because no 2 days are ever the same in environment and health, but specifically in your case, they're never ever the same, are they?
No, they never are. And there are interesting things. So a case I was looking at recently involved a nut-free product that was sold. The person eating it found a nut in it, which was tested and found to be a peanut.
Wow.
When we investigated this product, which had been distributed, was actually made in 3 different countries. Part of it was made here, part of it was made there. So you're trying to uncover remotely what's happened, and no one's going to own up to having a nut in a nut-free product.
No.
But that made me aware, because it made me take a step back and say, well, things are complex. Food is complex. Food miles are complex. And certainly, if I look at where we are now with environmental health, the sort of things I'm looking at are sustainability. I'm looking at food security.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at ultra high processed food. So it's deviating an awful lot, and it continues to evolve, which suits me.
Fantastic. So, again, going back to your various experiences, a lot of your skills are obviously going to be transferable, but just to adjust into different regulations, different cultures as well.
Yeah, and that was an interesting one for me. Certainly, when I came to do my first work in London, I didn't understand a lot about how different cultures, how you interact with them. I'd come from Australia, I'd come from Brisbane, I'd come from a quite Australian background, I guess. And it's an easy example. I had no idea that refusing a cup of coffee to sit down with a business owner in some cultures is considered quite rude. But we were taught, you accept that cup of coffee, that's a bribe.
Yeah.
But no, it's part of the sitting down, the having the conversation. Certainly with in Australia, when you're talking about the First Nation people, they have to have a yarn. They like to sit and they talk. And this is what they do. And I think one of the things you need to be aware of is when you are working with businesses, it's not about get in, get out as quick as you can. It is taking
relationship.
Time. Building relationships, having conversations, taking an interest, and that helps the rest of the time go quite well. And I think also being quite upfront and being quite honest with them about what you're doing and why you're doing it, because so many businesses don't understand the why. They're told this and they're told that, but no one really explains why it's important.
And that will make a huge difference, just taking that time to explain why, right?
Yeah, it is. And that helps. That is that relationship. So when you go back the next time, you've got that relationship established. You've got trust building. And that trust is important, I think, as well.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Because it's not just that relationship with you, but it's with the client, with the business itself, but with the local authority or the consultancy that they're working with, and it's an ongoing relationship, isn't it? Pretty
Absolutely.
much like with Buckingham Futures, what we do is we have relationships spanning 20 years, and some of the people that are heads of service now, I placed them in the first graduate role, and it's about growing with that individual and us growing as a business and me growing as a person with them. And kind of helping them along their career. So it's totally about relationships, adding value and learning constantly.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can think of one case where I went to meet a client. I brought along a trainee account manager, because at that time I was working as an account manager for a big consultancy. Met the client, got on really well, very interesting lady. I then encountered her again. She'd left the company and she was freelance auditing. So she did some work for me, and that was amazing. And then I met her again because what she did next was to go and do her environmental health degree. And I met her as an environmental health officer in one of the businesses that I worked with. So you never know.
You must have inspired her.
It'd be nice to think so. But it's interesting when you say inspiration, and I would say there are people that have inspired me and people that have opened doors for me in my career. And I was actually thinking of that the other day, thinking I want to do something to acknowledge them, and then I don't want to miss people. But what I would say is I got most inspiration from the people that perhaps felt that I couldn't do it. And that's what drove me forward. People who perhaps decided that, that's Liz, she'll just tick along. But to me, if
You
someone,
proved them wrong,
oh, I did prove them wrong, and
and you proved yourself right.
well, it gave me, I suppose, the motivation
Yeah.
to go out there and to show, So, okay, I didn't have the English environmental health qualification, but I went out and did a postgraduate diploma in health and safety, and then my law masters. So,
Amazing.
that's a good motivation
Of
from
course.
me. And I think, what I would say to people is, if something doesn't turn out quite the way you want it, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means there's a different path.
You may have to pivot.
Absolutely, and that's one of the skills we have as humans. We learn how to perhaps stand back, reevaluate, and then have another go in a slightly different angle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That leads me on to my next question. Talking of inspiration, is there a message you would like to give or share with our listeners, especially those who are thinking of embarking on a career within environmental health? What would the message be to them?
So, I think if you're looking for a job that's secure, if you're looking for something that is going to challenge you, that you're going to feel rewarded, that you can continually grow within, that you can reinvent yourself to go into a different element of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want variety, I think if you want a job where you actually feel like you make a difference, it's a path that's worth looking at. And certainly there have been days when I think, oh, what else am I doing here? But if I had my time again, I'd take the same path, because
I love
for a
that.
career, it's just given me so much.
So you wouldn't go back and be a vet?
No, I wouldn't. Too much hard work. No, I like what I do, and again,
Amazing.
It's moulded for what I like, because I've been able to create the job into what works for me, and I think that's the beauty of a job that you can do that with, and certainly environmental health is that job.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today on a Diary of the EHO podcast. It's been a real pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Excellent. You're amazing.
Thank you.
You're a pro. Yeah, it's really good.